how do I know when I'm in the different phases? And the answer to that question is you decide that. So it's up to you to track your cycle and to get really curious. There's no right or wrong answer. And you'll know yourself, like when you feel that, like, say, for example, after your period and you're kind of wondering about when you're coming into spring, you'll just feel, you might still be physically menstruating a little bit or spotting after your period, but you'll feel in your body like you're out of the cave. You're out of that. And then, so that's an indication for you that your system is, your hormones are changing. But the reason it's important for you to decide that is because everyone's body and cycle is so different. And the more you track and the more curiosity you have about your own seasons and how you experience your seasons, just the more you'll understand them for yourself.
I'm Shreya Parekh, and you're listening to Empower Her, the podcast for busy women aged 35 and beyond. If you're feeling stuck and unfulfilled with your health and wealth, get ready to be empowered to take action. My guests and I will be providing you with knowledge, resources, and ideas to help you broaden your perspectives, learn more about yourself, and define your path to live your absolute best life. Be sure to hit that follow button to stay tuned with Empower Her and check out the valuable free resources available on the website to support your journey. The menstrual cycle and its associated symptoms are often not discussed openly, leading many women to mask their discomfort with medication without exploring the underlying causes. I'll be speaking with Lisa de Jong, a health coach and educator specialising in women's health, the menstrual cycle, chronic pain and trauma. Lisa employs a holistic, integrative and trauma-informed approach in her work. Join us as we delve into the different seasons of the menstrual cycle and learn how to understand your symptoms and be more attuned to your body and mind, empowering you to take control of your cycle and overall health. We'll also explore the role of food and nutrition in managing your menstrual health. Lisa, welcome to the Empower Her podcast. It's great to have you on. I'm really excited to talk about, to have this conversation because I think it's such an important part of women's health. Could you please introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you were doing and your journey to what you're doing now? That would be great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Shreya, and hi to everyone. It's really nice to be here. So I am Lisa. I'm based in Ireland and I work as a women's health coach specialising in the menstrual cycle, chronic pain and trauma. I work with clients on a one-to-one basis, and then I have also founded a professional academy called the Menstrual Coach Academy for people who want to incorporate this work into their practice or their professional journey. It's a long story, but long story short, I was that young girl in school who had really bad period pain and a lot of shame and confusion and fear and anxiety because of it. And the pain for me was very bad to the point that my mother had to come in and collect me. I was taking a lot of painkillers. I developed a lot of fear of pain as well. And, other than that, I was generally quite a happy kid, and the school I was in was quite active. There was a lot of sports and things like that I was really into. So it really interfered with my life. My period did in school. And then I eventually went on the pill because that was the only option at the time to help with period pain. But I got a lot of different side effects from the pill. So I hopped around different contraceptive pills to find the right one. And I did find one that was good. But then a couple of years into taking that, I got really, really bad cystic acne. And at this stage, I was in university and I just felt, to be honest, I felt really fed up and quite angry that, I didn't have an answer to this problem. And I felt like there was there must be a root cause to my period pain that I felt like the pill was just masking, and then my body was reacting to the pill. So I found myself in just a very difficult situation emotionally at the time as well. Like a lot of people in their 20s, I was going through mental health identity challenges, that kind of thing, anxiety. And anyway, long story short, I decided to come off the pill, and which I don't really recommend now, but I came off it and went on my own journey of learning and Googling people. At the time, this was over 10 years ago. At the time, there weren't really many books written on periods, and it wasn't a conversation in the mainstream really. And I don't think podcasts even existed back then, so there wasn't really a lot of information. But I did find some information when I dug deep into Google, and I found a couple of books that were about menstrual cycles and hormones and understanding your hormones and living a little bit more in sync with your cycle and eating better for your hormones. And it was the first time, Shreya, that I realized that my it's not just about your period, it's your whole menstrual cycle. And I started to understand the systemics of the menstrual cycle and the mind body connection as well, and the interconnectedness of the menstrual cycle with your body. So I just became really interested in that, and I started practicing all these different things. That's when I also started practicing meditation, and I started then going on different, like at that stage, then I was in the workforce. I was working in tech in Dublin, but on the side, I had this passion, for this journey I was on, and I was taking a lot of courses. At one point, I trained as a Pilates instructor because I was interested in the body and physiology and something called our fascia, which is the connective tissue. So yeah, I just ended up taking a lot of different courses, and eventually more and more of the things I was studying and learning about were really aligned with this journey of chronic pain in the menstrual cycle. And I decided to run a workshop in Dublin. And this was back when people were using meetup.com for arranging events, the free events. Yeah. So I put up a workshop on meetup.com, and the workshop sold out. I think I sold it for like €5 a head. But it was really popular, and it really, and I was so interested in, I became really interested in then teaching people what I was learning. And then some of my friends were wanting me to teach them about their cycle. And then I started working with clients, and then I met my supervisor. So it very much grew organically from this personal frustration and very urgent need that I had into I guess a lot of passion and curiosity, and then working with people. And then the more I worked with people, the more I learned. My work deepened my understanding deepened as I worked with people. And then some of my clients and people who were in my workshops wanted to learn how to teach this, and then that's when I decided to create the academy. So it was a long journey.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's hopefully answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the journeys people go on, their own personal health journeys, and they from that they really discover a lot of information, and it's so useful to then use that to help others with their journey on with their health. Talking about the menstrual cycle, it's not just about I'm on my period. Can you just talk a little bit about what that means, the menstrual cycle, the different stages of the menstrual cycle? Because from people's perspective, it's literally, oh, I'm on my period now, or I'm about to come on my period, or I've got this symptom, that symptom, so that must mean I'm due on. But there's more to that. It's not just that.
Absolutely, Shreya. Yeah, it is. And the scales fell from my eyes when I discovered this. I was like, oh my God, all this time I've just been taught that, I get a period and it's 5 to 7 days or whatever, and you have to manage it and don't show it to the world. But then I discovered like you say, the different stages. So I'll speak to it from a hormonal perspective, and then also from an energetic perspective, which is really helpful. So when we're on our period, on a hormonal level, what's happening is the two main hormones of the menstrual cycle, progesterone and estrogen, are at their lowest, and that drop in estrogen triggers the shedding of the lining of the uterus when there isn't a pregnancy, and that then becomes menstruation. So that's what's happening on a hormonal level. And because hormones are on that level, it's normal then to feel tired, to feel vulnerable, to feel inward. And the energetic archetype to describe that time is the internal winter. We're using the seasons of the year to understand the cyclical nature. It's from one of my teachers. And So the winter is, if you think about like here in Ireland and where you are in the UK, it's generally dark, cold, wet, damp. It's good to eat warm, nourishing foods, wear warm clothing, mind ourselves, take good care. And if you think about nature, it's the same nature. The trees shed their leaves in the autumn and then nature goes inward in the winter. It doesn't go away. Winter doesn't, it's not a death of nature, which nature is life force energy. It's just a retreat back into the underground in order to replenish itself for a new beginning. So it's the same thing with the menstrual cycle. We have this shedding of the lining of the uterus, and on a psychosomatic, mental, mind-body connection level, it's therefore normal to feel all the things whatever it is you're feeling during that time. And it's a good idea to give yourself permission to go inward a bit, rest, take it easy, take shortcuts. You don't have to lie in bed all day, but it could just be things like wearing looser clothing, or, maybe you've made batch cooked some meals and you don't have to cook or something, or asking for help, things like that. Taking the foot off the gas a little bit in your life is a really good thing to do for our nervous system during this time. So that's the inner winter. So then after menstruation, estrogen, which is the first hormone in the follicular phase of the cycle, starts to increase. And we get this rise of this hormone, which the purpose of estrogen is to rebuild the lining of the uterus. And one of the things it does also is it can kind of give us energy. We start to come back to ourselves. So from that energy archetype perspective, after winter, we have spring. So spring is the season between summer and winter. It's not fully summer, but it's also not winter. And yourself, like in spring in Ireland, it's like, oh, one day I'm wearing a warm jacket, the next day I'm in a t-shirt. So it's a bit of a dance in terms of energies. And so because we have this rise of estrogen, it does mean that we're coming out of that internal dark, period cave-esque space, and we might feel then a desire to exercise more, a desire to pick things up what we've left, or socialize and connect with people more. So all that is very normal, and it's good to follow that energy, but to still just take it easy in the spring, to not go out full guns blazing, because as I said, it's not the summer yet. And then after spring, we have the ovulation phase, which is from a hormonal level in the cycle, that's the place in the menstrual cycle where we have the highest level of estrogen. And when estrogen gets to that certain level, it triggers another hormone in our brain called luteinizing hormone to stimulate the process of ovulation. So ovulation is when one or both, usually just one of the ovaries, releases an egg into the fallopian tubes. And that's the time of the cycle when we're fertile and we can become pregnant. And because estrogen is at its highest there, we might have more cervical mucus. We might have more energy, more desire to connect. We might feel more like flirtatious, in our zest, more connection to this kind of life force energy in ourselves, and perhaps more confidence. And one of the things that estrogen does is it's a bit of a buffer as well for our nervous system. It gives us emotional resilience. So if you're going through difficult life circumstances and you're in your ovulation or inner summer phase, you probably have more like capacity to deal with shit, basically, right? Yeah. Stuff that's going on. And you can maybe say yes to people more during this time. And then when ovulation happens, estrogen then goes into this thing in the cycle where it drops quite quickly after ovulation. And then we transition from that summer energy into the autumn energy. And it's a bit of a transition, because what's happening on a hormonal level is estrogen drops very quickly, and this other hormone called progesterone starts to come in and it starts to go up. So now, because of this like switch over in hormones, some women will feel that, and they might feel like around their ovulation time, they might feel a bit rattled or anxious or very tired all of a sudden. So that's again very normal. when we're in that autumnal phase, the premenstrual phase, it's also called the luteal phase. This can be a challenging time because the world is not set up to support that type of energy, because it's kind of like the coming back into autumn again, and that can feel quite scary. And so we can experience things like PMS, PMDD. For me, I know I get a bit snappy during this time, and it's kind of a sign for me that I'm like, oh, okay, I'm coming into autumn now. And a question I often get asked, Shreya, is how do I know when I'm in the different phases? And the answer to that question is you decide that. So it's up to you to track your cycle and to get really curious. There's no right or wrong answer. And you'll know yourself, like when you feel that, like, say, for example, after your period and you're kind of wondering about when you're coming into spring, you'll just feel, you might still be physically menstruating a little bit or spotting after your period, but you'll feel in your body just like you're out of the cave. You're out of that. And then so that's an indication for you that your system is, your hormones are changing. But the reason it's important for you to decide that is because everyone's body and cycle is so different. And the more you track and the more curiosity you have about your own seasons and how you experience your seasons, just the more you'll understand them for yourself.
Yeah. That's a really great way of putting it, actually, with the seasons. I love the kind of, winter, spring, summer, autumn. I never actually thought about it that way, which is a great way to think about it, for sure, because it actually, you can, it's like when you're trying to revise for an exam, you link things with something, so then
yeah. And
so
it's helpful.
Remember it more.
Exactly. And it's helpful because you can then, and it's also like, there's no judgment in it. And, and like you say, they're linked, like you link it to that, but they're also linked to each other. So you can't have, like I said, we started off this part of the conversation around, we used to just think about periods, but like we can't have winter without all the other three seasons. So now you acknowledge your seasons, and it's actually a really nice conversation to have with your buddies, with your friends, and be like, oh, I'm in my winter, and the other person might be like, oh, I'm in summer, let me know if you need anything, so it's kind of fun too. Yeah,
I don't think people, they talk about their periods even now. I think it's, I know things have changed, but certainly when I was growing up, it was not a conversation that you really have. And any symptoms that you have, you just either get on with it and, keep your head down and get on with it. Or when you do approach your GP saying, I feel like this and I feel like that, it's always kind of, well, track your, I was told, monitor these things and take the pill, take this, take that. And it's kind of masking a lot of the symptoms. The other thing I wanted to talk about, a lot of women have problems with their menstrual cycle. Some women don't have periods. So, and I guess, I don't know, there aren't any seasons. How does that work? And how if they don't have a period, or if they're really sporadic, I'm assuming that means there's kind of some cause for concern.
Yeah, well, there'd be lots of different reasons, I think, why. Well, I mean, obviously, if someone's pregnant, that's a whole other thing, or if they've, had hysterectomy or something like that, or there's all different reasons why post miscarriage, post abortion, all these things that like why we might postnatal breastfeeding. Actually, the more I think about it, there's all these different reasons. So whatever your experience is, there's nothing wrong with you. Firstly, you're not broken, and there's a reason for it, and I'm sure it's very normal as well. So just to really take away a bit of the fear and the worry and the anxiety, there's always a reason. It sometimes just takes a bit of time to kind of figure out, but when it comes to that, and I think it's a great question, like when it comes to the cycle tracking, or you might have an irregular cycle, or you're entering perimenopause and your cycle is starting to become irregular, what some of my clients do is they will just not worry too much about the cycle itself, but pay attention to how they feel in terms of just the seasonal analogy. So like, and I actually have a friend who, she's in menopause, post-menopause now, and she still uses her seasons, and she is able to feel into them and feel like, oh, today I feel like I'm in a summer kind of day, or it's a winter day or a spring or autumn day. Or you can have a part of your day feels a little bit like for me, my mornings, my energy in my mornings feels quite delicate. So it feels like spring, my mornings. And then by midday, it's like, oh, summer. And then autumn is kind of the evening, afternoon, and then so it's the same. It's the day. A lot of people also track the moon as well. And that helps with that cyclical, because it's like 28-day cycle with the lunar, the waxing and the waning moon cycle, the lunar cycle. And then you've got the seasons of the year. So if you think about it, there's lots of different like seasons happening outside of the menstrual cycle too. And you can use those as handrails to help you anchor yourself into something. And to not worry too much about your menstrual cycle if it is irregular or sporadic or whatever. You might need intervention or investigation or whatever. That's another conversation, but you can definitely use these tools to help you just anchor and ground into something in yourself. Yeah, it's a bit of a compass, really.
Yeah. And what are your views on, a lot of women struggle with their menstrual cycle, and some women, they experience all sorts of symptoms, ranging from severe, stomach cramps, or feeling really, really low in mood, and craving lots of food or certain types of food. When do you start thinking, at what point do you think this doesn't seem normal, or this should not really be happening? Because I know, especially with cramps, a lot of people start taking paracetamol or ibuprofen or perhaps even stronger painkillers to get rid of the pain. But for me, I've heard, having cramps isn't really a normal part of having a period, and we just assume it is, and therefore just end up taking paracetamol and ibuprofen. So what's your view on that? And if you are getting severe cramps or other symptoms, what should you be doing about it?
Yeah, it's a big question, isn't it? Absolutely. It's really, really like, firstly, the way I put it is that debilitating cramps to the point where you're like I was, fainting and interfering with your life isn't normal, but it's very common. So there's a difference between common and normal. And I think what happens is something that's common gets normalized, and then we internalize that to be normal. So, and I think that's what this work is about spreading that message that we don't have to accept that message anymore, that like having debilitating cramps, there's a lot you can do about that, and there is a lot of support you can get. And also there's no shame either in taking painkillers, and a lot of people do, and it's really helpful, and it's a bit of a journey to figure out which ones are helpful for you and which ones work and which ones don't work. And then it really is a journey of education, and it's going on a process of figuring out where you want to get to. So maybe for some people, they're okay with just taking painkillers and getting on with it. That's fine. They don't have to go on this big long journey. And then other people, they feel a call to do some work around this. But what I see in my own practice is that there's a lot you can do to help with your menstrual cycle, to help with pain. And there's lots of different modalities that you can bring in. So, for example, if you are someone who has, really bad chronic pain, you could go to the doctor and get tested for something like endometriosis. That's, the medical route. And or you can also do work with your nutrition. You can do nervous system work. You can do mind-body work. There's a lot of really interesting research now around neuroplasticity and our brain and pain science. It's a huge part of my own practice, is helping people to rewire their brain if they have a lot of pain. So there's loads of things you can do. It just is it's just a bit about figuring out what works, what doesn't work, not overloading yourself either with all these things. And just finding your own path with it. And I think that's a really, really important thing, that women and people with cycles feel like they're in control and they have agency and choice around there are steps with this. But I do think, like, you're right. Like, I do think it is good to question what we might have internalized as normal when it's not normal. And
Yeah.
and like, also, if you were navigating the medical system, you might have to advocate for yourself, too, with getting answers. I've been there, and a lot of my clients have been there. So it just takes a bit of time sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, a lot of women, they just mask their pain. And when it comes to women's health, it's always masked by synthetic products, medicine, medication. And you're kind of not solving the problem or finding the root cause of that problem, because there could be a problem and you're just masking it, and then it could end up in a bigger problem as you get older.
Yeah.
And this is the problem I'm seeing more and more now, with women just, not taking the time out to really discover and figure out what's going on with their body, and what's normal and what's not normal anymore.
100%. And I think you're right. Like, the thing about painkillers is that, like, there's pros and cons. If you're taking a lot of something like codeine, right, which is in a lot of painkillers, or you can take it by itself, one of the side effects of codeine is that it can constipate you. And if you have regular constipation in your gut, that then can actually create, like you say, it can create hormonal imbalance. And if you have constipation while you're on your period or in the premenstrual phase, it can contribute, it can contribute to a lot more cramps, because when our uterus contracts, it releases something called prostaglandins, which are these chemicals that help to contract the uterus, but they can seep into the bowel and create a lot of pain. And then we get, like, really loose bowels on our period. And, it can be a bit of a really difficult thing to go through. And a lot of people go through that. And then, yeah, like, becoming really overly reliant on painkillers isn't great for our liver health either. So yeah, it's a bit of a difficult one, because, like, for people who are really struggling with pain, they might need them. So I would always advise for people to do both, like, to go on the journey, do the inner work, do the nervous system work, do the chronic pain work on anxiety, work on trauma, work on healing, your inner child, all of these things that you can do. That's, it is deep work, and it takes time, and it's a bit of a life journey. It kind of never ends.
Yeah.
And also, if you have a shit day with cramps, but you're working on this other stuff, and you're, helping with nutrition and diet and stuff, then don't feel guilty for taking a painkiller either, because that can also really relieve anxiety and be a support for your mental health. Personally, I'm very grateful to now say I don't need painkillers as often, but if I do, it's kind of almost for peace of mind, really, and if I'm ever out and about on my period, I'll have them in my bag, and I don't even need them, but just knowing that they're there, because I have such a history with chronic pain. But if I do take them, like, I generally just need to take, so I like to take ibuprofen. I think that's a really good painkiller for period cramps. I don't feel like I need a lot of them. And then, I don't, like, because the guilt and the shame also causes problems too in the nervous system. So that's why I love this nervous system lens, is because when we get the nervous system has 3 different stages we can be in. We can be in freeze, fight, flight, or rest and digest. Those are all normal. Nothing wrong with you if you have, freeze and fight, flight energy. But if we spend a lot of time in the stress responses, it's pumping out a lot of cortisol and adrenaline, which are hormones that create inflammation in the body. So when we can learn to do that inner work on the nervous system and spend more time in rest and digest, our body spends more time in self-healing. And if you look at it through that pain science lens, we are more likely to have pain signals in our brain when we are in the fight, flight, or freeze response, or even if we just have fear of pain before it's there. And that's a really common thing as well I see in this work, is because of the cycle. And this is why sometimes the tracking can, backfire a little bit, because if you have a history of a lot of pain or PMDD or emotional challenges with your cycle or PMS, tracking the cycle can then lead to fear of pain and anticipating pain. And then that fear and anticipating pain and worrying about pain is part of pain. It's part of the experience, because it's like we're not being present when we don't have pain, we're just thinking about, oh, we might have pain tomorrow.
Yeah.
And it's a huge issue because it becomes this big thing in our brains that we have to rewire. So that's why I like to say that, like, if you're on a journey of recovery with chronic pain, it is like the ultimate mindfulness exercise, because it's really calling you to be present to yourself, and one of my teachers said to me, like, having pain brings you closer to yourself, so if you're having pain, and regardless of what kind of modality or healing tools you use or painkillers you use, just speak kindly to yourself, to send yourself some compassion and self-love is a really important and nice thing to do, I think.
Mm. When you talk about pain, so, you've obviously, there's physical pain. What about emotional pain, or, mental pain? Because we have mental pain and then physical pain. Is there an effect? Can emotional pain affect your menstrual cycle as well?
100%.
Past or present emotional pain?
Yeah, that's what I mean about the inner work. If you have a history of emotional pain that's not processed, or psychological distress that you haven't really addressed. Now, we all have stuff. Do you know what I mean? We don't have to go back and clean up everything. But if there's stuff there that we're kind of avoiding because it's hard to look at, it depends. Like, and I will work with clients individually and take them through a process. And I always prioritize consent and agency. So it really is up to the person to decide how they engage with this. But generally speaking, if I'm going to speak from a physiological point of view, and the menstrual cycle, if we have a lot of what's called it's called trauma physiology, right? So, like you say, emotional distress in our history, what happens is the body can sometimes get confused between what is in the past and what's in the present. And it can perceive stuff as threatening based on that, and then we could, like I said, we could be living in this fight flight energy, or we might have unprocessed grief, and it's like this, and that I think that unprocessed grief can actually cause anxiety. Sometimes if we have anxiety, underneath it is sadness or anger or feeling hurt, so the anxiety is kind of like the lid that kind of keeps it down. And so what happens then is, this is the mind-body connection stuff, is when we have a lot of that stuff, then we have this fight-flight response in the nervous system, and our nervous system is in a defensive mode. And we're not, and what happens then is it's a lot of energy to keep that turned on, and we're not in that nice relaxed state of the rest and digest system. When we have our body in the rest and digest state, where we're at ease with ourselves, we've made peace with the past, and we've processed some big emotions, that energy no longer goes towards our protective responses, but rather it goes towards joy, life, connection, creativity, manifesting stuff, living your life, your purpose, and then your digestive system and your breathing and the self-healing that happens in that place on a biochemical level. And you're right. That's the inside job work. That's going on a journey of doing healing and recovery work. And that can be slow, but it has, like, if you start doing that work, you can get results very quickly with that. Yeah.
How do you know? I mean, there are so many options for healing work, depending on what emotional issues are going on. Obviously, there's counselors, there's psychologists, there's psychotherapy, there's NLP, there's other modalities like I don't know, Reiki. There's so much out there. How do you know what to go for? Is it literally trial and error? Like, what advice would you give if someone knew that there's something going on in their body, emotionally, and they need to deal with that thing? What do you do? What's the first step you take, really? Because, I mean, there's so much.
I'm a huge fan of counseling. I think it's great, like any kind of therapy. And I think at the end of the day, those are all modalities. But what the research is showing that is that when you feel comfortable in the relationship with the practitioner, that's more important than the modality. Um, I would follow my curiosity. I would follow my gut feeling. I also, any kind of time I've worked with a counselor before, I prioritize people who share decision making with me as opposed to tell me what to do. I think that's really important. Um, I, it is nice to go on a journey of healing and recovery in a way that's kind of creative, where you're learning tools and modalities that you might, like, you have a toolkit then to work with. So say, for example, if I have a difficult day or something challenging happens in my life now, um, I can just pick up a tool. So I have journaling that I do one day. The next day I might do some movement. The next day I might go to yoga. Sort of, it's just a bit of a pick a mix.
Yeah.
So it's just, but at the end of the day, it's just about processing your feelings, getting connected to your own self, your higher power, your energy, whatever word you want to use, feeling that connection, and then finding joy and pleasure in your life. Because, and one of the things we have to be careful with when it comes to the healing and recovery journey is a lot of those modalities will be spending a lot of time focusing on the problems, when actually what's really good for chronic pain work is learning to have fun and enjoy yourselves while also spending a bit of time processing emotions. So it's good to have a boundary around the therapy or the journaling or the meditation. Just set a timer on those things, or do them once a week or once a month or whatever. And then the rest of the time, learning to, enjoy yourself, go out with friends, do nice things, be kind to yourself, like develop the skill and the muscle of kindness to yourself and fun and engaging with your life. Is a huge part. Now that might feel very far away for some people who are really stuck in a lot of pain and trauma. But even if you do small things for yourself, like watch a movie, take a bath, listen to music, those small things are really good for the nervous system. But yeah, I would just really encourage people to just trust yourself with what you choose to. There's no right or wrong, but like, you can just figure it out and trust yourself with your decision making.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Mm.
So when it comes to food and nutrition, obviously, there's a saying, you are what you eat. Now, how can what you eat impact your menstrual cycle? In what way? And are there things that kind of you should and shouldn't be eating throughout your menstrual cycle? Because I know, like, as examples, like when I'm about to have my period, I'm always hungry, and then I'm hungry for the wrong things. Well,
Yeah.
when I say wrong things, I shouldn't, I want those crisps, I want the chocolate, I want all the, I want the McDonald's, just give it all to me.
Yeah.
I'll try and refrain as much as I can, but, it's difficult. So is that my body telling me something, like, you're lacking in something, or, you're is that like a response in my brain? Oh, it's coming up to your period, you need some chocolate and some McDonald's. And
I love that, Drea. Yeah, I can really relate. I'm sure all the listeners can relate to this. The science under that is that we actually do require more calories in the premenstrual phase, because if you think about it, it's like the inner workings of our body. We're working hard to prepare for menstruation. So like, menstruation takes a lot of energy. Like, even though no one says that, but it is. It's like your body is going through a process, like we're going through an internal winter, and we're shedding this lining, and it's work, because as women and people with menstrual cycles, we have the biology to procreate human life, right? So it's to really not undermine that. It's a lot of energy. So that's the reason why we crave more food, more calories in the premenstrual phase. And when it comes to diet, yeah, there's a few different things to think about. First is, you're right. There is an importance around balancing your what's called your composition of your food. So, in order to sort of eat more optimally for your hormones, it's important to balance proteins, fats, and carbs. And what often happens is a lot of people are maybe under eating protein and fats, probably because we kind of, we tend to grab carbs easier because they're, they're sold to us. Carby food is sold to us. Nothing wrong with carbs, but we just have to remember to include plenty of protein in our diet, and also healthy fats. And then of course diet culture shames fats, so that we might have a little bit of fear around eating fats too, but actually having healthy fats, things like nuts, seeds, avocados, eggs, dairy products, nut butters, if you're vegan or vegetarian, like plant-based yogurts or just regular yogurt, those are really, really good. Olive oils, things like that, those are good for balancing your blood sugar levels. So the way I think about it when it comes to food is three pillars. The first is the composition I just told you about. The second one is plenty of fiber, because that helps with elimination, and water. So fiber and water. And then the third one then is just to enjoy yourself, enjoy your food, and to not be too strict about it, because the way I was talking about fear and the nervous system and the fight flight response, we can obsess about food and nutrition and feel like we have to have this like really rigid plan. It's just my opinion that can sometimes create stress, because I've seen it. And so just trusting yourself with your food choices. I do think it is good to plan a little bit around your cycle. So if you are thinking about nutrition around your cycle, maybe in your premenstrual phase, increasing the calorie count on your plate, increasing the protein amounts on your plate as well, that can really, really help offset those cravings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's is always the cravings to me,
I know.
yeah, for sure. So if you're what you're putting on your plate generally isn't very healthy, or the right kind of food groups and things like that, can that affect your menstrual cycle and your moods and your hormones and things like that? And can you use food and good nutrition to kind of improve your symptoms when you're going through your menstrual cycle?
Yeah, you can. Well, the answer to that is you can, and then also you don't have to. So, and I'll speak from personal experience. So when I was, on my journey of figuring out what was going on for me, I did the really clean eating vegan diet. I tried vegetarian diet. I tried high fiber diet. I did gluten-free, dairy-free. Had a lot of and it was clean, like it was really balanced, clean food. And then I sort of swung in the opposite direction and just ate whatever I wanted to. And instead, and then during that time, I was focusing on my brain and my nervous system more, and I had less pain during that time when I was just eating whatever I wanted to. Yeah. Yeah. So, but having said that, like we all know, I recently had a burger and chips and a milkshake, and I felt like shit after, and it was really hard to sleep, but I wasn't going to give myself a hard time. So you kind of know, I just know myself, if I eat a big doughy cheesy pizza, I just don't feel great. Not that there's anything bad with that, but for me, it's like if I'm out eating a pizza, I kind of like to have maybe a salad and then share a pizza with someone. I actually prefer that for myself. It feels better, and I can still enjoy the pizza, rather than just, it just becomes too heavy for me. Mm-hmm. So it's just kind of figuring, but you want to think about, nutrition. I personally like to start the day off with a non-sugar savory breakfast. I think that's really good. I quite like smoothies as well, fruit and veg. But yeah, there's a lot of people who are doing really focused nutrition plans when it comes to their menstrual cycle, and that it definitely can really help. And I've seen a lot of people really improve their symptoms. I think it just depends from person to person and your choice with regards to your healing modality.
Yeah.
Yeah,
of course. I mean, ultimately, like I kind of say a lot now, and I'm beginning to learn more now, that really there is no, it's not a copy and paste. We're all very different, and what works for me might not and probably won't work for you. If I said to you, hey, I have salmon 3 times a week, and it's really sorted out my issue with X,
Mm.
that might not work for you, and
Yeah.
it probably won't, so
Yeah.
it really isn't a cut and paste solution. And I'm really learning that more and more now. You really have to tune into your body. And yes, it can be a long journey to try and figure out what your body needs mentally and physically and what you're putting into your body. But there are things you can do, with
Yeah.
what you're eating. Like you said, when you have a burger and chips or pizza, you really feel it. But that may be because you're not used to eating that all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
that's not your typical diet every day.
No. Yeah.
And when you
It's
do eat that, you really see the difference. And that's like me as well now. That's not my typical diet, burger, chips and pizzas and sandwiches and whatever every day. And when I eat certain foods, I can really feel it. And the next day, and I don't have a great sleep. I don't, there's certain things
yeah.
goes on in my body. And it's having that awareness, that self-awareness of and tuning into your body, and knowing that. But if you are having a diet of, burger and chips and sandwiches and pizzas and stuff every day, maybe that, reducing that can improve your symptoms, whatever those symptoms are, whether that's feeling lethargic, whether that's,
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Because I think with stuff like that, because it's quite high carb, it means our blood sugar levels are going up and down, and that's not very good for our hormones. So, I think a nice question to ask yourself is like, what would be nourishing for me? Like if you're out in a cafe or in a restaurant or you're in the shops, just asking yourself like, what would feel nourishing for me? And if you are in a habit of eating a lot of fast food and high sugar kind of foods, again, there's no shame on that. It's just, but if you want to change that habit, or if you're curious about if that might help you, just start with one day a week and see. Like, start with
yeah,
one meal, start with changing, maybe eating a little bit more fruit in the mornings, or a smoothie or salad before your sandwich. Like, if that's actually another thing that can be really helpful, is eating vegetables and salads before carbs actually really helps to balance off the blood sugar levels too, and it can help really reduce cravings and improve our energy levels. But you're right, I think food is medicine. And it absolutely, it has to come from a place of like feeling you're in control. But it can be really helpful to read a book about this, to like watch some content about nutrition, and also to not get too stuck into the fear thinking that it has to be perfect either.
yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah, definitely.
Mm.
So with that said, what kind of top three tips or things would you recommend women can do like right now to help them really be in tune with their menstrual cycle, and understand if there are any issues, just pointing out those issues really, because we, like I said, we mask a lot of our issues with taking tablets and things that we may not really need to take. And yes, of course, take the thing, the medication that you need to take, like you said, to help you relieve you of the pain, because you can't go out into the world in chronic pain, and carry on with your day. That's not right either. But
Mm.
what would you recommend women do?
I definitely encourage start with finding ways to slow down your nervous system in that the days before your period or when you get your period. And like I said, it doesn't have to be that you cancel all your plans or anything, or you're lying in bed. Just asking yourself like, what one or two small things can I do in order to really slow down my pace? It could be that you might lie in bed longer in the morning, or you might, instead of having a coffee, you might have a green tea or a chamomile tea, or you might take a few deeper breaths before you start your day, or you might do a little meditation or something small, just to really help slow down your nervous system and to not go into that overdrive mode. Um, and keep practicing that, and then just see what happens, and then let us know, because I'd be curious. And tracking your cycle, I think, is number two. Is just getting really curious about your seasons and how they might present. And like I said, if you don't have a cycle, be curious about how you can relate to those concepts anyway. And then number three would be find ways to soothe if you have fear of suffering and fear of pain. or if you are experiencing, like you were talking about, emotional pain, and there's a lot of dark thoughts, the reason why we can suffer with that is because of the fear of them. So find ways to soothe the fear. So it could be compassionate self-talk, it could be breathing exercises, it could be talking it out with a friend or a counselor or a coach or someone, journaling, just finding ways to just bring a bit of inner parenting to yourself during those moments. And that's a learned skill to do that. It takes time to learn how to soothe fear. But it's really, really, I think we live in a world of chronic fear everywhere. Like, the minute you turn on the TV, it's just, the media, and it's just a lot of fear everywhere. And it really, really wreaks havoc on our nervous system. So finding ways to, just to kind of like heal a bit of the fear, and also see what happens and come back and let us know.
Yeah. I think probably tuning out of and turning off all the news channels probably the first step.
Even if you did that I sometimes do that for like a week, because I'm so overloaded because I'd like to stay on top of what's going on in the media, but sometimes it becomes too much. So you could come off social media for a few days and just see how you feel. Just be curious about how you feel when you do that.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's helped me. I've deleted my news apps, BBC and all of that, and I hardly watch the news now. I tune in now, like now and again, just to get an idea. But I think it's just, there's too much.
It's so
negativity.
intense.
There's a lot of negativity, and there's a lot of stuff going on. But so I wanted to ask you, I'm a big fan of collaboration. I think, it's something that we should all be doing. So I wanted to ask you what collaboration opportunities you might be looking for right now with your personally.
That's really cool. I love that. Yeah, I'm always up for teaching. That's my favorite thing to do, is teach. So if you want me to come and teach with you or for you or with your groups or whatever, always up for that. I love having these chats. Anyone who has a podcast or anything like that, definitely send me a message. And then if you're curious about the work, Menstrual Coach Academy, we sometimes, every now and then, we bring speakers in as well. So that's another thing we're on the lookout for as well. So just anything to do with teaching and speaking is my thing.
Great. That's fantastic. Lisa, thank you so much for being on the Empower Her podcast. It's been great to have you on and super insightful. I absolutely love the analogy with the seasons. I think that's great. And I hope people can relate, think about it in that way, because it's got me thinking, that's for sure.
Thanks so much for having me, Shreya. It's such a pleasure to be here. Have a great one.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks for tuning in to Empower Her. I hope today's episode has left you feeling inspired and motivated to make a positive difference in your world. Please follow the podcast and share it with anyone who will find it helpful. Until next time, keep striving for positive change and greatness for all women.